Actually, I thought I might just start this one in progress so that you guys see we chatter all the time. Hi, I'm Michelle Stinson Ross, and you're actually watching the live broadcast of Feelings Matter brought to you by Mindful Appy. And I kind of surprised Karen a little bit and just went ahead and pressed the button without warning her.
I was like, oh,
That was on
goodness.
me.
It was such a good
But
conversation.
Yeah.
it's I hope that you guys enjoy kind of getting a sense of, oh, we actually like each other and spend time talking to each other other than just this produced thing that we
Yeah.
do, because I think that's important for you to see that there's way more going on than, just our conversations around mental health in the workplace and employee engagement and all that kind of stuff, that we really do like each other and enjoy spending time sharing stories with one another.
And I would
And
say also supporting each other. I mean, I love
certainly
that so many of our conversations in the 15 minutes before we start are really vulnerable conversations. We're just like, yeah, like that's been really hard. I've not been doing that. And so I love that because I hear a lot of, oh, that's awesome. Oh, good for you. Oh, that's going to be great. And so I love that we're also supporting one another.
And today we want to support the connection between mind and body. And apparently it was time for me to have this conversation because as soon as I started teeing everything up for this, I'm like, I am not moving my body enough. This is part of my problem. I am not moving.
Mhm.
So for me, the work at home experience, having my work here with me where I live, is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because it's really, really convenient. There's no commute. I can start and stop. I can do whatever I need to do. But also because it's here, I have every temptation to just sit down and get to it and not move because I don't have to go someplace else to go to an office or what. I mean, I literally get up and walk around the end of my couch and sit down. That's as far as I go.
Mhm.
And I'm beginning to realize that, oh, that actually might not be a good thing. I might need to be more intentional about that.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, same. I think that that's, some of what you shared in the introduction to this was this whole notion of some of the data is showing that we're all spending more time moving less for that exact reason. Um, you know, we have no more commute. Even just you think about it, like walking up and down the hall if you're in an office, or walking out to your car to go to some meeting, and oh, you stop at Starbucks, and I mean, you just by the nature of being in a space with other people, you're moving more. So for most of us, we haven't just been moving as much. And so we're definitely starting, I think, to all of us feel the impact, and certainly recognizing what we were talking about earlier is we really then have to be intentional about moving and recognizing how important it is for our mood. I think I told you guys that I broke my foot back in the summer, and I've just been slowly, and then I had a little bit of I fell back a little bit this last week or so where I was having some pain and freaked out because I thought I had a stress fracture. And I remember feeling really low about it. And I told my husband, it's like mostly it's because I need the exercise and the movement for my mental well-being, for emotional well-being. Like I just know I feel better when I'm moving more. Good news is MRI, no stress fracture. I just need to pace myself a little bit.
Sure.
He was laughing because I said, I just don't understand how out of character for me to move faster than I should. Yes, got to slow it down a little bit, got to slowly ramp up, but it's so important to our mood. I don't think most of us realize how important it really is, in the sense that again, that notion of our body is connected to our brain. Like we keep talking about that, like mental health is health, and it's brain health, and the brain is in our body. And so whether it's, I know we were talking beforehand about what we eat, staying hydrated, all of those things play a part in our mental well-being, and exercise definitely does. I one of the things that has been really fun for me in going out and doing this in workplace has really just been the research that I've had to do to be ready to speak to a group of people about the importance of this. I know I shared with you one of the images, which I love sharing with a team of people, which is what's the impact on the neuron pathways in our brain when we've had no exercise, and then just 2 weeks after, and then 2 months after. regular exercise. Like
Mhm.
literally exercise alone helps just build up those neuron pathways that help our emotional well-being. Because as we talked about, many of us in this last 19 months of intense chronic stress, uncertainty, so many things we've been navigating, it has been a challenging time for everyone. And in the midst of that, we just need to recognize that we've how that movement might help us, because we are working from sort of a fight or flight response so often, and we don't even realize it. So our body's building up chemicals of adrenaline and cortisol. When we get stressed out, our heart rate rises, our immune system gets diminished, as is our digestive system as well. All of those systems shut down because it says, hey, we're getting ready, something big's about to happen. And sometimes the something big is not a big bear chasing us through the woods, right? It's a deadline. It's agonizing over how are we going to celebrate the holidays this year? Whatever it is, stress is anything that our bodies perceive as a threat. And we've got to learn to understand that as sort of the cycle that it is, and what are some of the things that we can do to break those cycles.
I like what you were telling us earlier before we started the broadcast about completing the stress cycle. That just made so much sense to me. Can you explain to people what that is and why
Yeah.
you need to do that?
Yeah, I've been pointing to the recent released book by doctors Emily and Amelia Nagoski, so they're twins, who've written this book called Burnout. And it's not new research, but it's research that they've sort of elevated this notion of the stress cycle and how important it is to complete the stress cycle. So the stress cycle starts with any stressor that we perceive as a threat. And I think that's really important, that so often we might see something we don't even recognize that we're feeling it as a threat, but our body feels it as a threat. I'll give you an example. I've had some challenges around my blood pressure. And I remember the first time I went to the doctor and she asked me, so tell me about your work. Are you stressed? And I said, no, I love my work, which was not her question. And that's what she said. That's not what I asked you. And I said, well, I don't think I'm stressed. And she said, you don't think you're stressed, but your body does. And I think that's key, is recognizing that sometimes we don't recognize that some of the daily just conditions of our life, we perceive sometimes those things as threats. And so it's good for us to recognize those. And the reality is that our brain is this reptilian brain when it comes to stress. So whether it's a bear chasing us through the woods or a deadline, our brain and our body perceive it in the same way. So our body, again, our heart rate starts to grow up, our blood pressure goes up, our immune system, our digestive, like all these chemicals are released. So all of these things happen. Adrenaline gets released, cortisol. And so what we can do and we should do is be intentional about recognizing that we have to take an action to complete the stress cycle. Because if we don't, we're left in this state where we're still fight or flight or freeze, and our body's waiting for us to let it know it's okay, you're safe now. So there are about like 7 different ways to complete that stress cycle. And one of the ways that you can complete it is exercise. And it can be as simple as, honestly, when you're stressed out, just doing some jumpy jacks, or I was talking to somebody earlier and they said, yeah, I really like a 10-minute walk just around the block sometimes will help. Like any kind of just that movement where you're extending a little bit of energy, and that alone can tell your brain and your body, hey, it's okay. You're safe now. So think about that. We've been had this experience of 18, 19 months of chronic daily stress. It's no wonder sometimes we feel the way that we do. Sometimes the challenge is we don't even have the energy to expend on exercise.
Mhm.
And we know that we should, but it's like, oh, I'm tired. And that's the hardest part. That's where I think having a buddy can be really helpful. Is there someone who you can either exercise with, or who can be your buddy, where you check in on each other and say, okay, you're going to get up and walk today? I'm up, whatever it is, because it's hard sometimes, but the benefits are immense. And the other thing to realize is the exercise, while it can happen right after you've experiencing a stressor, it can also happen proactively. I love that. Like my husband, he takes a bike ride in the mornings, and he says, it completely changes his day, right? Because he's sort of proactively done that. But that regular exercise will ensure that we're just mentally, emotionally the best version of ourselves. So stressor is the beginning of the cycle. Then we take some action. Exercise is one of those things. In case you're curious, some of the other things are things like crying, laughing, which I love that it's the extremes. I know you're just like, look at Tina. She lights up when I said that, right?
I love laughing.
Because it's just the physicality of them. I've been advising some workplaces like they ought to consider having some space somewhere in their office where people can go have a good cry when they need to, and that we as a culture have a tendency to see crying as weakness. But what if we took that back and recognized that crying can be a place of empowerment? Because really what we're doing is we're empowered to just release all those stressful chemicals and move on. So crying, laughing, creativity. So whether that's playing the piano, doodling, whatever creative thing you like to do. We were talking about painting rocks earlier, right? How I started doing that last year with my daughter, and it was like, oh man, it's such a great stress release. One of the other things that's really cool is physical affection, and keeping in mind that while that can be with a partner, spouse, a loved one, a family member, it can be also with your pets. Like there's some
Aw.
great studies that have been done around, Tina, I know you have a couple of pups, like that our body releases oxytocin when we do have eye contact with our pets.
Oh,
So, but here's the really cool thing. A 20-second hug, a hug in which both you and the other person are just hugging each other tight, like that also completes the stress cycle. So, hey, feeling really stressed out and you know it, like ask for a hug. Give a hug when you see that there's somebody, like how powerful that is. So lots of different ways to complete that stress cycle, but man, physical activity is a really great one for doing that as well.
Now I'm thinking about Richard and his favorite
Uh-oh, we're
long,
telling
awkward
stories.
hugs. I love them.
so fun about hugging. And this is an entertaining story. Richard, who's one of the Mindful Appy co-founders and also my spouse, also founded a nonprofit over 20 years ago called Operation Turkey. Feeds now 15% of the homeless and less fortunate in the country on Thanksgiving Day, and it's still 100% volunteer run. And one of their favorite fundraising activities was turkey hugs. So he and his executive director would dress up in a full on turkey suit, legs, gobble, head to toe, rent the turkey costume. And any company who donated $1,000, they would show up at that company and hug every single person there.
Wow.
Can't really do that so much with COVID these days.
I know that's made it really challenging, hasn't it?
What
But
a
outdoor
shame.
hugs with your mask on, you can totally do that. I feel like you
Exactly.
could do some hugs in a turkey costume. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I loved hearing that. Like I'd always sort of known that, but that notion of that 20-second hug, um, super powerful. So, I love that all those things are really simple, accessible things. It's not anything that we have to go out and spend money on or do anything special, but it does require this. It requires intentionality on our part. It requires us
Mhm.
being aware. And Tina, you and I were talking about that groove that we get stuck on. Like we
Mm-hmm.
get stressed and we just have this way of responding to that stress and we get stuck in it, and it's just because we're human, like, and that's the path that we know, and it takes so much more intentionality to say no, I'm going to do something different. Michelle, you were talking about ballroom dancing, and I
Yes.
love that because it's like I also think that when we think about exercise, a lot of people who don't like exercise, like understanding that exercise can come in any form or fashion. And
Mhm.
I know from my own experience that I will be more consistent about getting exercise, getting movement into my day when it's something I have fun with that I really like. So I like to hike. Like that's one of my favorite ways to get exercise. When I had broke my toe, my husband was like, "You should like get in the pool and, swim laps and stuff." Well, I've done a couple of triathlons, and after the second one I was like, "I'm done." Because I don't like swimming, right? So he's telling me, this summer, he's like, just go a few times. Like, I feel like you'll get used to it. And I just laughed. I said, you have forgotten the triathlons. Like, no amount of time in the pool makes me like swimming laps. And so I'm not going to do them. So it is like finding what is that thing that brings you joy that you enjoy doing. And I loved, Michelle, that you were talking about ballroom dancing because what a great way to get exercise. You talked
Mhm.
about the fact that it also is like a mindfulness exercise for you as
Mhm.
well. I love that.
Yeah, so whether it's a hike where you're out in nature and you're giving your mind the ability to spend time taking that in, taking in the feel of the breeze, the smell of the air. I mean, up here in Minnesota, we're definitely into that transition into the crisp fall smell in the air.
Mhm.
And so that type of thing, I know, will engage all of the senses. You can hear the birds chirping or the leaves rustling in the breeze. You can feel the sunshine on your skin, all that kind of stuff. Um, I get a lot of that same type of thing out of dancing because it really has my mind engaged. It's not
Mhm.
one of the things I hate the most about getting on a treadmill. I know that that is a good option when when I'm pressed for time, the weather's bad, blah blah blah. Yes, getting on the treadmill is a good thing because I'm moving my body, but usually I find when I get on the treadmill, my mind either wanders and I start trying to think through all of the things that are bugging me, which is not what I need to be doing in that moment. Or I turn on the TV and watch like the news or something, which really isn't all that great either. Whereas when I'm doing dance with instruction, so I'm learning something new.
Mhm.
I'm listening to my instructor. I'm making eye contact, and because it's ballroom dancing, I'm also making physical contact. But that combination of moving my body with music, with purpose and concentration because I'm having to learn something, I don't have time for the rest of the tape to play in my head and distract me
Mm.
and cause more stress. And so it's really interesting that those types of things, whether it's hiking or dancing or something that not only engages your body but engages your mind, is the most beneficial.
I think about all the parents I've been talking to lately whose young teens are struggling and their school kids
Mhm.
are struggling, especially the teens, and all the sporting events that got put on hold for so long and how much stress that's just going to
Mhm.
compile. I remember when I was a teen, I have the premenstrual polymorphic mood disorder that
Mhm.
just means you get anxiety and depression at certain like half of the month, and then half of the month you're fine. And that those things come on when you hit puberty. And I remember as a teen and preteen, I was a swimmer, and I'd spend a lot of time swimming, about 5 hours a day. And there are times when I look back and I think, I don't know if I could have gotten through, like, say, junior high and the stress of junior high without having that athletic, commitment to
Mhm.
showing up and to staring at a black line and going back and forth across the pool. I think in some cases it may have just saved me as a preteen.
Mhm.
And I've talked to
Mhm.
a lot of parents lately who are sharing with me that their teens and preteens are struggling right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I can totally see that. And I agree with you that I think for many people that's a common thread or story of recognizing that sometimes it has been some I have a friend who lives with chronic depression and she took up running and she talks about that all the time. Like she's like,
Wow.
running has saved my life. And so important. I think one of the things that you raise is I don't feel like when as we talk about, I know we're as we talk about like youth in particular, but I feel like one of the things that we've got to shift is to start helping our teens and preteens early on. We ought to be having mental health conversations about helping them develop that toolkit of what it is and how they can help themselves and giving them the language so that they can talk about if they're anxious, like being able to name that instead of not even knowing why they feel the way they feel, right? Because I
Mhm.
think doing that and really ratcheting up that social emotional confidence in who they are, what triggers them, and then what helps them is going to make for a much better equipped adult then as they continue to face like life is just the human condition of ongoing struggles and challenges and stress. And so um, I think it's so important that we be a lot more intentional because I do think that we've shifted. I think, there was a time when we didn't have all of the electronics and we lived in different kinds of communities. And so, by the nature of that, kids spent more time outdoors, playing, moving, all of those things. My husband often tells the story of like he grew up in a small town, and it's like if you wanted to be on the football team, you were on the football team. Like everybody participated in whatever they wanted to participate in. And now you have these schools where it's just like, you have to audition or try out for those kinds of things, and not everybody makes it onto the swim team or to the lacrosse team or whatever it is. So we have to be real intentional, because some of us are not going to be that level of athletes like in the pool, right? I love that you mentioned that you love swimming after I just said, oh, can't do swimming, right? But it's helping our kids, but also for ourselves, figure out what's that thing, like what is the movement that I enjoy doing. Is it just pushing the dining room table out of the way and having a dance party at home, whatever that might be. Oh, bless you. I want to
It really is getting physical here today.
I bet that closes out the stress cycle too. That physicality of that.
So.
Big sneeze.
Do you ever have that moment when you accidentally, like, a little bit of your saliva rolls down to your esophagus, like, unexpectedly?
Oh my gosh, I thought it was
God,
a
I'm
sneeze.
choking.
Okay, that's too funny. I want to circle back to one of the things that I learned in the research that I was doing, which is, again, that I mentioned to you about the neuron pathways and stuff, and how exercise has been shown. The research has shown that exercise really does create these neurochemical changes in our brain. One of them that I didn't know about is that when we exercise, our body creates this chemical called the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. It is considered the brain's miracle grow. I don't know about you guys, but I grew up with this notion that it's like you had a certain amount of brain cells and then they died off, so you had to take good care of yourself, or otherwise, when the reality is that our brain actually creates new brain cells all the time, but it does require some miracle grow, things like BDNF, to ensure that. And when we exercise, it creates the potential for our bodies to actually produce some BDNF, that neurochemical that helps our brain create new cells. It also creates dopamine. And so you've certainly heard of that, right? And then serotonin as well. So the dopamine really can help motivate you. The serotonin can boost your moods. There are studies that have shown that low levels of depression, studies that have took a group and had them take an antidepressant, and then took a group and had them engage in regular exercise with the same results. Now I want to be clear, like I'm talking about low levels of depression. People that live with higher levels of chronic depression, like doesn't quite, but we know that it helps, right? We know that exercise helps that. So, and I say that because I don't want anyone to feel like, oh, well, I have to take an well, that doesn't mean that works for everyone, but we do know that that's why, because when you exercise, you are producing some dopamine, some serotonin, which are the same kinds of drugs that we utilize in medication when we're helping certain mental health issues. Noradrenaline also, so that adrenaline, which stimulates your energy. And then basically those new connections are made between the cells and the neurons. And so that just helps us with our thinking. So it's not uncommon for us to think about when you are regularly exercising, when you feel like your brain feels clearer, when you feel like you're just more focused. That's not just you thinking you feel that way. Like it's really happening because the exercise is helping that. I saw that you posted, Michelle, the fact that the CDC point, right, which is
Right.
CDC recommends 150 minutes of exercise every week for all of us. And when you think about 150 minutes, like it sounds like a lot. But one of the things that I do when I walk into the workplaces is go like, you can break that down in all kinds of ways. So it doesn't mean that you have to do, 5 days of 30 minutes every day. Like maybe it means it's 3 days a week and you're going a little bit longer, or maybe it means shorter times during the week and then taking a long hour-and-a-half long hike on the weekend because you have the time and it's a beautiful day, right? That there are all different kinds of ways, and that even spurts of small amount of exercise, like we have a tendency to dismiss that and say, oh, I didn't really exercise. Hey, if you took that 10-minute walk around the block, your body says, thank you. That's awesome. Like that counts towards those 150 minutes and does help. So, and I think that's super important again, because, not everyone is going to run 5 miles a day, and not everyone is going to be the, person that goes into the pool and swims 50 laps or, whatever it is. That whole thing that we were talking about how comparison is the thief of joy, Like, don't let that keep you from, it was funny, but I said something to my daughter about the fact that I was wearing this boot and that at least it looks like I had an athletic injury. And she looked at me and she said, "Well, you did. You were playing tennis when you broke it." And, but it's so funny, like, I don't see myself as an athlete, right? And so I think so often we have that tendency in our culture to again compare and think, well, I'm not good at that. I'm not a good tennis player. I'm not a good runner. I run so slow. I'm not a good ballroom dancer, right? But that understanding that we can learn and grow, and that exercise in the long run really does make a difference in
Mhm.
helping us be the best and happiest version of ourselves.
I want to circle back around to okay, so how does this apply in the workplace? Because
Mm,
one of the things that we were kind of getting warmed up around was talking about we culturally view productivity as the most valuable thing. So if we're not sitting at our desk, if we're up walking around, if you know, we begin to perceive that as not the most valuable use of our time. How can workplace culture be addressed to make sure that we are getting up and moving, that we are
mhm,
engaging in the full cycle when there is a deadline coming up and I need to deal with this stress rather than just sitting here worrying about it for the
right,
rest of the
right.
afternoon? What steps can be made to address company culture, social culture in order to make that movement more possible throughout the day?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's critically important is understanding that so often many of us are working from that place where our tank of ourselves is on empty or almost on empty, and we keep working and working and working. So, I don't know if either of you have had this experience, but the first road trip that we ever took with our kids, we drove to California to the mecca of Disneyland and drove back. And on the way back, we miscalculated where the gas station was. And oh my gosh, we were sweating it because it's July, it's hot out, we've got 3 young kids, and we're just watching the tank and we're like, "We're not gonna make it, we're not gonna make it, we're not gonna make it, oh my gosh." Well, we just barely squeaked into that, gas station, and we were able to fill in the tank. So 2 things that were amazing to me. 1, man, it was so much more stressful. I don't remember any part of that trip in the sense of enjoying any of the scenery or anything because I was so overwhelmed by the fear that I wasn't gonna make it. But then it was the first time that I'd ever filled up the tank of that vehicle and didn't realize how big the tank actually was because it took so much gas to fill it up.
Wow.
So my point in all that is that we are allowing ourselves, and no one benefits from it, and especially our workplace doesn't, in a culture in which we invite and encourage us to work from a place of empty. So the reality is that exercise is again part of the fuel that makes us have better concentration. I mean, I'm going to give you all the benefits. I've got it written over here. All the benefits we get from exercise: boost our memory, increases our concentration, improves our mental health, enhances creativity, slows cognitive decline, improves circulation, aids learning and memory, builds more brain cells, prevents disease. Like, hey, if you have an employee, if you have a team in which you want them to be their very best version of themselves, you would want to encourage them to get exercise. Because you know what? We can keep sitting at our desk and thinking, I got to finish that, I got to finish that, not recognizing that, again, that 10-15 minute walk, that starting my day a little bit later so I can get the exercise in. Like, I don't know about you, Michelle, when you've been ballroom dancing in the past, did you feel a difference? Like, did you feel you were a better version of yourself when you were doing it?
Oh,
I heard Tina
absolutely.
say it. I
Absolutely.
heard Tina say
Because
it with the swimming.
mood was boosted, concentration levels were better. Obviously, I wasn't carrying around an excess of weight, which caused all kinds of other physical
Mhm.
problems. So, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Tina? I mean, I
Yes, I
absolutely.
mean, I feel like I need less sleep when I exercise. I've noticed I get into this cycle of like I get too tired and then I get a migraine and then
Yes.
that throws off my exercise. But when I
Yes.
get back into it, I'm like, wow, I think I'm done sleeping already and I'm not
Yeah.
tired in the morning.
Yeah.
So it's a
Isn't that
huge benefit.
amazing?
And I think even the like doing yoga,
Oh,
if you've ever wanted to like figure out like what exercise is, I think you will like you can't help but become more mindful and more present because the practice of yoga is what that's about. And if you have
yes.
some really good instructors that teach you those breathing techniques and those awareness techniques, that you really can happen into even more health benefits with a practice like yoga than you know you would expect. It's
Yes.
very much more than you would
Absolutely. Oh, big fan myself. Like I had never tried yoga. It was one of those things that I told myself, "Oh, I won't be any good at it."
expect.
And so, but wow, I was just like stunned. Like I remember feeling like I'm now addicted to yoga because it was almost like my body craved that,
Mhm.
craved the mindfulness, craved the breathing, craved the stretching my body, which Michelle, that's some of what like the ballroom dancing is, right?
Mhm,
Like you're
mhm.
stretching your body, moving your bodies in a way that it's not accustomed to, and it is empowering. Just like it is to swim through a lane of water. And like for me, even though I feel awkward at it still and don't feel like I'm good at it, like I do remember that sense of feeling empowered by being able to do that. So man, if there's like at the end of the day, there's something really valuable for employers in terms of really encouraging our teams to do that, to really, as I keep saying, like be the best version of yourself, whether that's at work or at home or whatever it is, like making that a priority. As someone who, I used to have somebody that would say to me, because I would talk about this in regards to meditation, but I think it's true for exercise as well. Hey, if you don't have time to meditate, you probably need to meditate. I would say if you don't have time to exercise, you probably need to exercise because it is that whole thing that we keep saying that's not as important. And back to our conversation we had before we started, which was exist in a culture in which we feel like our value in the workplace and in other places is connected to our productivity. How much do we produce? What are we doing? We are not human doings, we are human beings. And we've got to take care of ourselves by sleeping well, eating well, and definitely getting like those real basic things and getting that exercise. Because I do think then we truly are our best version of ourselves in the workplace. And workplaces are smart to support that and encourage that for their teams. And you're seeing some of that. Like you're seeing workplaces that, have like competitions for different teams and stuff where it's like, hey, here's a way to gain some health wellness points, like participate in this or do this together or whatever, and really elevating that because we know everyone benefits from folks being their best version of themselves.
So
Fantastic.
great.
So
Yeah.
one last thing to post
Okay.
up as we close out is how to reach out to NAMI Central Texas for workplace wellness workshops like this one on Mind Your Body and all of the other great topics that Karen has been sharing with us. That's the link to go find out more and request your training session with Karen. Is there anything either of you would like to add as we close out?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to have these great conversations and elevating the work that we're doing, because I really do think that what we're being called to in this really critical time in our history in the midst of this pandemic is to change the culture in the workplace around mental health and understanding that mental health is health. And I think one of the things that you're doing by elevating our programming is really just elevating what we're doing, which is coming into the workplace and helping educate and inform everyone so that they better understand why that is the case, how everything really is connected. And I think giving people the language and I hope the inspiration and motivation to really change that culture and become workplaces that invest in the best version of employees by providing and encouraging exercise, wellness of all kinds, giving them tips and tools for yoga and meditation and breathing and all those things that we know we benefit from as humans. So I appreciate the opportunity and always love talking to you guys.
Likewise, Karen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and have a great day.